Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Any change is actually good.
How the province is trying to tackle the nursing shortage.
We speak different languages.
A look at the dynamic between BC's small towns and Indigenous communities and why progress toward reconciliation is slow.
The transit system that can be difficult and intimidating to navigate.
And making bus stops more user-friendly. Could it translate into more ridership?
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. The province is spending $12 million to help address the nursing staffing crunch in BC. It will mean getting internationally educated nurses registered and licensed faster. As Mira Baines reports, advocates are hopeful and say a new streamlined process can help nurses navigate a complex, costly, and lengthy process.
Some actually give up because, coming here, I came as a student, but if you're like an immigrant and you have families to feed, that's a lot.
Jenny Arseno had already worked for 5 years as a registered nurse in the Philippines, but she says the road to get licensed to practice in Canada was long and expensive.
Well, the whole process took me like 3 years to get my registered nurse.
After taking that first licensing exam, an internationally educated nurse has to then apply to meet the requirements for the province they want to practice in. In BC, it can take up to 2 years or more for them to practice here. Health Minister Adrian Dix says there will be more support to help them navigate the system and less fees and applications.
Internationally educated nurses play a vital role in addressing the current demand, as we've said, of our healthcare system. And I think consolidating their assessment processes is a crucial step in ensuring people across the province have access to the healthcare needs.
The BC government is introducing fast-track strategies for internationally educated nurses starting in May. They include a single application and fee for both licensed practical nurse and registered nurse registration, and a triple-track process to assess an applicant's competency for 3 nursing designations at one time: RN, LPN, and healthcare assistant, and $9 million in bursaries to help with assessment fees. The BC Nurses Union supports the move as the province's nurses continue to deal with staffing shortages further magnified by the pandemic.
Last year, there were thousands of nursing positions across this province that went unfilled. So I believe these efforts to streamline the process for these internationally trained nurses is one very positive step in the right direction.
Advocates for international nurses say the changes are a signal that they're welcome to work in their profession in BC.
It's a welcome news. It's been something that we were trumpeting for the past few years, how it has gotten to be so difficult for foreign trained nurses to get qualified to work in BC.
The province says a campaign to promote the new initiatives will get underway shortly and hope to attract new nurses to the province. Mira Baines, CBC News, Victoria.
Over the next few days, the Winters Hotel in Vancouver's Gastown is set to be demolished. The building went up in flames 1 week ago, displacing more than 100 people. And as John Hernandez reports, residents will soon move into new housing, but they're still waiting for answers.
Scarred by flames, this 100-year-old building's days are numbered.
The chances of repairing this building safely just don't seem to be viable at this time.
Last week, the Winters Hotel went up in flames. The cause is still under investigation. Today, officials unveiled plans to demolish it.
The city will make every effort to finish the demolition process as quickly as possible with all safety precautions in place. As we appreciate this is a significant disruption to residents and businesses.
Most of the closed-off streets and sidewalks in the historic neighborhood are expected to reopen on Friday, but officials say the cleanup will likely take much longer, with the building owner incurring all of the costs. As for the Winters Hotel's 70-plus residents, they've been eagerly awaiting to move into new units inside this vacant building after spending the last week in busy shelters.
It's been hell, really. We've been shuffled around town, and I don't know how many of us are here. There's probably a good 50 or 60 of us.
it's kind of dire that we get moved into our new place so that people can be shifted around.
A handful of residents began moving in today following inspections, a hopeful note after an otherwise trying week.
It's just really hard. I lost my cat. I've lost everything. And we've only got this $75 so far. Like, what's $75 gonna do? Buy a shampoo and conditioner and that's it. What about the rest of our life?
And even with stable housing on the way, what many residents really want to know is how the fire started and if it could have been prevented.
I wish someone from the authorities would come here and tell us what happened. You know, we just got no answers. You know, I don't know.
Answers that won't bring their old homes back, but could give them some much needed closure. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
It's the first of its kind in Metro Vancouver. A new mobile shower program is aiming to bring more dignity to people experiencing homelessness in Burnaby. The Society to End Homelessness is running the program every Thursday morning at the neighborhood church. The mobile facility has 2 units with a shower, toilet, and sink. It will offer toiletries and clean socks when possible. The initiative is meant to address stigma and increase self-esteem. The husband of a Surrey woman killed by a runway delivery truck is suing Amazon. Parmjeet Masuta was walking her 8-year-old twin daughters home from school in December of 2020. The lawsuit says the van was parked illegally with the handbrake off and it was facing the wrong direction. It rolled into traffic and hit a vehicle before hitting Masuta. The lawsuit says she pushed her daughters out of harm's way before the van hit her. Her husband is seeking damages from the truck's driver, Amazon, and 2 logistics companies. Well, a BC resort CEO accused of making sexist remarks is out of a job. Vivek Sharma of Fairmont Hot Springs Resort was placed on leave after his comments at the BC Tourism and Hospitality Conference, suggesting women in the audience go clean some rooms and do some dishes. In a brief statement to CBC, the resort's board of directors says the post of the CEO position is now vacant and they'll immediately start looking for Sharma's replacement. Sharma was also the subject of complaints at his previous job for an alleged comment concerning rape. For the past few weeks, we've been on our search for the best small town in British Columbia, and that's meant exploring the challenges and the opportunities they have going forward. Reconciliation can be hard to achieve, but it's also much needed in these small towns. Justin McElroy reports on the dynamic between small towns and Indigenous communities across the province and why progress can be slow.
Ask the mayor of Pemberton about reconciliation with the local First Nation, and you'll get one answer.
It's evolved and changed in a big way, and I think it's a lot more collaborative than it used to be. There's a long way to go.
The town is named for a Hudson's Bay Company surveyor and sits on unceded Lil'wat territory. But he says there are strong connections with them.
We work very closely together. I feel that there's an ease in terms of picking up the phone between myself and Chief Nelson.
But talk to Chief Nelson and you'll get a different answer.
Well, we're on talking terms. I mean, we speak different languages, you know, on things, and yeah, but the understanding is still not there.
The Lil'wat Reserve sit on just 0.006% of their traditional land. Nelson has watched Pemberton grow by leaps and bounds in the last decade, with his people mostly excluded from taking part.
I did send a letter to the government stating that we have to stop everything that's going on, like any industry, and that we're still sitting here. We're not part of the, the higher development of things that are going on here.
Across BC, small towns are often on unceded land where Indigenous settlements once thrived. First Nations were forcibly displaced to reserves, excluded from opportunities in town.
The reservation itself was that we were not allowed to leave the reservation at times.
The reserves are part of the foundation of the Indian Act, and part of the reason small town reconciliation can be scattershot.
This is by design. First Nations are focused on the federal government because of the Indian Act, which is still in place today. And so a lot of the government relationships are focused towards Ottawa or in Victoria as well.
Ginger Gosnell-Myers is a fellow at Simon Fraser University who works on urban Indigenous planning, policy, and decolonization. and says small towns should better appreciate opportunities in working with nearby Indigenous communities.
A lot of First Nations communities bank in a small town. They get their groceries and their gas in a small town. They eat at the restaurants in a small town. And First Nations are really responsible for keeping these small towns alive, and that hasn't normally been recognized as a positive attribute.
But bigger symbolic changes could happen soon in two small towns. Powell River and Queen Charlotte just finished surveys asking residents about a name change to something less colonial. Meanwhile, at Mount Curie, Chief Nelson is just looking for signage that tells people who travel past Whistler along Highway 99 exactly where they are.
There's no identity to the territory, as you come in.
A territory next to a town still trying to forge a path forward together. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Mount Curie.
All the latest numbers looking at the country's housing market suggest sales are starting to cool down. In fact, nationally, they went down 5% in March compared with the month before. Leanne Young takes a closer look at what's happening in some of the hottest markets.
It's been years of lows followed by extreme highs in Calgary real estate. Now, experts say the market might be headed towards some balance.
Things are selling within, I would say, a week or two, but it's not within hours like it was in January and February, which is a good thing.
Corinne Lyle saw Calgary's housing market suffer during Alberta's economic recession. Recovery sent demand and home values surging. She says that encouraged more homeowners to sell.
And a lot of that has to do with the fact that sellers in Calgary are finding that they've seen some equity growth.
With more supply, she's felt the market cool. Latest numbers from the Canadian Real Estate Association shows monthly home sales are down, led by declines in Calgary, Toronto, and its surrounding areas. The average home price has also fallen to just under $800,000 from a record high of more than $816,000 the previous month.
It's definitely a cooler month overall, and certainly not unexpected, against the backdrop of rising interest rates.
The Bank of Canada doubled its key interest rate earlier this month. It's warned more raises are possible.
Because of this, people are going to qualify for a little bit less mortgage money than they used to qualify for based on their ratios.
Interest rates are still at historic lows, but the latest increases and tightened restrictions like the mortgage stress test have already triggered a cooling effect, and Zlatkin says buyers can benefit.
I am seeing a lot of those first-time home buyers who were having a lot of trouble bidding on properties and getting into the homes that they wanted to. I'm seeing them come to the table more now.
In hot housing markets like Calgary, though, buyers still don't have the advantage yet.
Definitely still a seller's market, for sure.
But this could mark a shift ahead. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
Okay, it's finally time to play ball. After 2 seasons away because of the pandemic, the Vancouver Canadians are set to hit the field tonight for their home opener. Our Dan Burrett is live at Nat Bailey Stadium on what's turning out to be a pretty lovely night for the game, Dan. And of course, you've got your Canadian tuxedo on tonight, as you would, for sure.
Naturally, yes. Not full tuxedo. We don't have the vest or the shirt or even the jean, but take a look at this, Anita. Check out this view. Players and fans have not seen this view here at Nat Bailey Stadium for almost 1,000 days. As you mentioned, it has been 2 seasons since the Seas have played here at home in the shadow of Queen Elizabeth Park. That's because in 2020, because of the pandemic, that season was scrapped. And in 2021, the Canadians decided to play down in Oregon due to COVID restrictions, but they're back at the Nat for what is now a longer season in single A ball. Great news for people who have been aching to get outdoors, and now they've got more time to do so. So game starts at about just after 7. They're playing the Eugene Emeralds today. Seas are now 6-2 on the season so far. Fans streaming in, they're waiting to get their hot dogs and their adult beverages, and maybe this cloud will clear just in time for the game.
I'm feeling good about that, Dan. I think it's going to be nice and sunny tonight, but obviously we'll check in with Johanna to see if that's going to ring true shortly. And Dan, there's a strong local connection for the person leading the Canadians now. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, that's right. The Canadians' general manager is Brent Lavallee. He grew up in North Delta, and he's done interviews where we've told interviewers that, in fact, his grandparents used to bring him here to watch Canadians games when they were the AAA affiliate. As well, interesting connection on a major league scale. The Canadians are the single A affiliate of the Toronto Blue Jays. That's why I see a lot of Jays jerseys and hats out here. And it's a good chance that some of these players that are going to be here at the Nat may go into the majors, and they may, in fact, play for the Jays. So lots of excitement here. People waiting, still streaming in. Doors open at about 6 o'clock. So waiting for the seats to fill up. People grabbing their foot-long hot dogs, grabbing their sushi. There'll be sushi races out here eventually. The grounds crew in their lovely khakis who like to do a little shuffling sometimes during mid-games. And especially during the season, there will be the fireworks extravaganzas and, of course, everyone's favorite midday activity, a nooner at the Nat. Anita?
Of course. Dan, don't eat too many hot dogs tonight. You got to come back here to do the 11 o'clock.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Johanna is here. And Joe, I think I've seen some photos of you and Dan at the games together over the years.
Yes, Dan and I are both Vancouver Canadian fans. So I was going to say had the better assignment tonight, but yes, he does have to come back and host. So that will be tricky. But I am so pumped that tonight is the night. In fact, check out the weather graphic I made for the start of the home opener tonight. We are watching that cloud to clear, and in the next hour or so, I think we're looking at a lovely mix of sun and cloud. Temperatures will be around 10. I think we'll drop a couple of degrees over the course of the game. Sunsets around 8, 10. So it is going to be a beautiful night to play ball. And I know we're looking at those home opener or the openers, the continued games at Nat Bailey through this weekend into the weekend. I've got tickets for this weekend. So watching the forecast almost every night. This high pressure system is bringing the sun through most of tomorrow. It's Wednesday into Thursday. They'll be watching for showers before sun returns for the end of the week. It's cool though. That will not change in our long range forecast. 10 right now at YVR. We really didn't get much past the double digits for anywhere across the South Coast. And keep in mind seasonals for sort of everyone across the South Coast this time of the year, 13, 14, 15 degrees. So we haven't hit that seasonal mark very often in the past few weeks. High pressure, though, will at least bring the sunshine, and our temperatures will be a little warmer for tomorrow. Anita, I want to time out that Wednesday rain, though, a little later on the show and talk about the weekend forecast coming up.
Sounds good. You're setting the bar high with those graphics, Joe. Can't wait for the next one.
No pressure. You're welcome.
Well, we're coming off a spring surge of transient killer whale sightings off the coast of BC and Washington. Over in Comox, to the delight of nearby onlookers, a group of orcas swam right up to the marina over the weekend. Take a look. 5 whales put on a show for about 2 minutes within meters of the docked ships. And the population of Big's orcas has been booming in the Salish Sea because of an abundance of seals and sea lions to prey on. It's rare, though, to find other species like southern resident killer whales near any piers. BC is a prime port destination, so ocean noise is abundant from ships that traverse our waters. Engine roars, seismic blasts, and electromagnetic waves make it hard for them to communicate and hunt. And for more on how noise and sonar pollution affect marine life, we're joined by the Executive Director of the Georgia Strait Alliance, Christiane Wilhelmsen. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So a lot of large vessels have to cruise through our waters, and they produce a lot of engine noise. How exactly does that noise affect marine life in the Salish Sea?
It's hard to imagine, but basically what it does is it can completely mask communication between animals. So southern resident killer whales in particular, but all marine whales and marine mammals echolocate. So that's how they talk to each other. They're clicking and making sounds all the time to tell each other where the food is, where to go, just like all of us talk to our friends and family. And when a ship goes by, it can completely mask what's being said. Now, this may not sound like a huge deal, but when you have a species that is so on the edge as far as its population and its health, when it loses the chance to feed, when it loses communication with members of its pod to tell them where to go, or if it's with its baby and it loses contact, the impact can be devastating. So with the growing number of ships in the Salish Sea, we're seeing just that increase in noise and impact on a species that's already at risk from a variety of different threats.
Oh, I didn't know all of that. That's pretty incredible. And with that, our ports are opening up to more traffic, shipping containers and cruise ships. So what are some of the ways to mitigate that noise so they can communicate?
Well, one of the things we found, thanks to some projects by the Port of Vancouver through their ECHO program, they've been doing these slowdowns of ships, pilot projects, to see what would happen, how much noise would be reduced in the region if the ships, all types of ships, slow down, especially in active paths, boundary paths, and areas like that where the orcas are frequently found. And it's been quite incredible to see both the number of ships that have voluntarily agreed to slow down to help collect that data, but to see just how much the noise decreased. In 2020, they found around boundary paths a decrease of nearly 50% in sound intensity. And they also saw an increase of between 17 and 20% in feeding behavior for the orcas. And that kind of increase in ability of the orcas to have time to feed unencumbered is incredible when the whales are already having trouble finding Chinook because the populations are in trouble. So we need to slow down the ships. We also need to invest, and this is a long-term strategy, in the redesigns of ships, because that is one of the problems. The way they're designed creates a lot of noise. So there are efforts to redesign ships so they can be quieter. And also we need to see the port do a better job of managing ships as they come in and out of the region. Right now, we do have ships that spend weeks at anchor in the Southern Gulf Islands going back and forth between the port. Just that small change in looking at how ships come into the region, we could reduce noise as well. So there's lots we can do, and we'd certainly like to see the voluntary port program become mandatory, because that will have an immediate impact on the noise levels in this region.
Christiane Wilhelmsen, as the Executive Director of the Georgia Strait Alliance, thank you.
Thank you.
Fans of classic rock are mourning the loss of a Canadian music veteran tonight. Jerry Doucette's hit Mama Let Him Play made him Billboard's Top 100 in 1977. His band, Doucette, went on to win a Juno for Most Promising Group 2 years later. The guitarist and singer-songwriter released 5 albums and continued to play small venues in Western Canada. But in 2018, Doucette announced he was hanging up his guitar for good because of health issues. The 70-year-old died yesterday after a battle with cancer. Well, have you ever been at a bus stop and not sure where each bus actually goes? Punch your ticket to improve transit. Next. Welcome to our commercial-free live stream. In Ontario, a growing number of people from Windsor are buying property in Florida. That's according to a realtor in Orlando who says he's getting more calls than ever before. So what is luring Windsorites and their dollars down south? It's a combination of pandemic fatigue and home buyers weary of bidding for property in their own city.
The pandemic created a shift. Canadians chased warmer weather and fewer COVID restrictions, with an eye out for second homes or investment opportunities. This former Windsorite turned Orlando realtor says all that made Florida an attractive spot.
People were sitting at home, and I think a lot of people started to look around and say, I don't know if I'm really enjoying my living space, and I can work from home, and I think I need a pool or a larger backyard, or I want a place in the sun.
Even up to a year ago, it was like there's no pandemic there. I mean, no mask wearing, it was just free for all. And once people start getting a taste of that, they're like, let's go to Florida.
This Windsor real estate investor has bought properties in the Sunshine State in recent years. He leases them out as short-term rentals, and it's not just because of the sun.
It's a lot more affordable to buy a property over here.
Take a look at these numbers from February. You've got Windsor on the left, Orlando on the right. The average price of a home in Windsor, Essex that month was about $704,000. In the Orlando region, it was about $401,000 US. That's just over $506,000 Canadian. Not to mention that Windsor prices went up even higher in March, reaching an average of about $723,000 last month.
Investing in Florida is a much cheaper and attractive, viable option. Central Florida experienced over 20% appreciation year over year. Plus, we're still expecting another 8 to 10% for the year to come.
Silvaggi adds Orlando is a great investment destination.
It really is all about Disney. And then you've got Universal, and you've got the city of Orlando is going full steam ahead with conventions and also all types of sports tournaments. So when you start adding all that together, it is unbelievable what's happening there.
Making it an appealing place to park your money. Katerina Georgieva, CBC News, Windsor.
They tell you what bus is coming, but they leave a lot of information, well, off the sign. So the question we're looking at tonight is, can we make bus stops better and also, as a result, get more people riding? Yute Lee has some suggestions on how a few tweaks might be a fix for ridership.
I've always felt that bus stop signs could be a lot better. So for this video, I'm taking matters into my own hands. I have a problem with bus stop signs. A bus stop sign really just tells you one thing: what buses stop here. But there's a critical piece of information missing. Where are these buses going? If I'm traveling to somewhere new, I have no idea which bus to take based on the signage available. The 7, the UBC 4, or UBC 14. There's just no way to tell. Now, this bus stop design is pretty standard for pretty much any bus stop anywhere, but for me, it's especially disappointing to see it being used in some of the busiest bus stops in the country. Case in point, this bus stop on Barrington Street in Halifax. It has no less than 21 different bus routes going through it and 0 instructions on where any of them are going. The result of all that, I think, is a transit system that can be difficult and intimidating to navigate. But it doesn't have to be this way. Take, for example, the subway. As soon as you enter a station, you're greeted with signs and maps everywhere, helping you find your way around the system. The signs tell you what stops are ahead of you, while the maps help you understand where you're going within the network. To me, this is proof that transit signage can be clear, well-designed, and most importantly, helpful for navigation. So that got me thinking, if we can do that for the subways, why don't we do that for the buses? How about I try designing some bus stop signs of my own? Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking, we have phones now, this isn't a problem. Well, I could reference the plethora of accessibility issues that come with phones, the risks associated with mass reliance on digital technology, the concerns around privacy, but ultimately, come on, just let me have my fun. So behold my creations, the new and improved, the harder, better, faster, stronger bus stop sign, at least in my opinion. These are all based on real bus stop signs in the real, non-metaverse world. This first one is for a bus stop on Granville Street in Vancouver. Like the original, it lists all the buses going through it, but the key difference is this map. It tells you where you are and where each bus route can take you from that point. If you need to get to Kerrisdale, you know to take the 16. If you want to head to Kitts, you can take the 4 or the 7. The next three are a set. They're meant for this bus exchange enrichment. This is a situation where there are not just multiple different bus routes, but also multiple different bus stops. So I thought that having signs at each bus stop, each with their own map, would be especially helpful here. And finally, we have that infamous bus stop in Halifax, and this one was a doozy. It's hard enough to fit 21 different bus routes on a sign in general, but still, I found some room to make improvements. Many of these buses actually only run during rush hour, and they head straight to communities outside of Halifax without making stops in between. So in this case, I made two different signs, one for the rush hour commuter buses and another for the regular buses. So with these designs finished, it was time for some public feedback.
I think it's very helpful. It's the color coding.
I love it. I love how it points out like all the individual like kind of key points.
This is really helpful.
It shows people where they need to go.
Got a broad overview of what we have going on in the transit system.
It's a good idea.
Is this your bus? I don't want to make you miss it.
I was going to catch this one.
Okay, then how about you board it? Thank you so much again. Now, as much as I love sweet validation, I still have a lingering question. Why aren't bus stop signs like this more popular? Why is there so little signage to help people navigate the buses? Well, there's the obvious answer. This takes a lot of work. Making these designs took a dumb amount of time, and that was for like 5 signs. That kind of effort might be justified for a subway station because there are just way more people using them. But for a bus stop, it might be a bit too much pain for too little gain. At least, that's what I originally thought, but it turns out that's not exactly true. This map helped me see this differently. It shows the number of passenger boardings at every bus stop and SkyTrain station in Metro Vancouver. The bigger the circle, the more passengers. What immediately catches my eye is that many bus stops are just as busy, if not busier, than the SkyTrain stations. In fact, you can see that the vast majority of transit trips here are taken on a bus. You'll find a similar story across the country. If you look at the numbers, buses actually make up a huge part of transit ridership in every city. In Toronto, the Humble bus is just as popular as the subways, and in Vancouver, Edmonton, and Ottawa, they make up the vast majority of transit trips. The only exceptions are Calgary and Montreal. To me, those numbers paint a different story. While the vast majority of public transit riders use the buses to get around, most of our efforts in improving signage go towards other forms of public transit. I think that's more than just a matter of cost. I think that's a difference in priorities. I've covered transit issues for a while, and one thing I've noticed is that buses are often overshadowed by other, more flashy forms of transportation, like trains, ferries, or hyperloops. You know, the things that draw ribbon-cutting ceremonies, press conferences, and politicians. Buses, they don't get those things. In fact, if they receive anything, it's stigma. I've heard them described as second-rate forms of public transit, something you only take if you absolutely have to. And I can't help but wonder if our indifferent attitude towards buses keeps us from making them a lot better. Because at the end of the day, it's the buses that are moving the majority of public transit riders in this country. And I think we could make a world of difference to a lot of people if we improve the experience of riding those buses. Maybe it could start with a sign.
And we did reach out to TransLink about its bus signs. TransLink says it's actively working to make signs smarter, including installing next bus screens at UBC. It's also adding Braille to signs across the network. And it says that a lack of space on signs impacts how much information can be provided. A renewed Russian offensive in the east as Ukraine continues to see attacks across the country. And another ultimatum from Russia to the defenders of Mariupol. We'll take you to Ukraine next.
clear, windy, and cool, the perfect day for a walk in the sun. But judging by the size of the crowd, West Coast weather was not the main attraction. It would appear that a surprising number of people out here are taking the threat of nuclear war seriously. Naturally, the full-time professional demonstrators were here, but so were labor unions by the dozen, church groups of every denomination, old people, young people, ethnic groups, women's groups. It was an incredibly diverse crowd. And Dr. William Epstein, for example, is a Canadian consultant to the United Nations.
I'll let you into a little secret. For 33 years, I've been officially involved in the struggle for disarmament, which means I've spent all my adult life as a failure.
But the size and enthusiasm of this crowd makes Dr. Epstein and others like him more optimistic than they've been in a decade. Jerry Thompson, CBC News, Vancouver.
In British Columbia, a new highway is almost always good news. It means jobs for some of the thousands of unemployed in that province. The Coquihalla project is no exception. There's plenty of work. The question is, for whom? Whit Fraser explains.
The heavy equipment and machines that are opening the beautiful Coquihalla Valley are also digging up old arguments about whether Canadians who live in one province have the right to live and work in another. BC labor unions are complaining because some of the Albertans involved in the $375 million project have brought in some of their Alberta workers. BC labor unions and the government are insisting that with the exception of key people, only BC residents should be hired.
They made an agreement with our ministry at the time. They'd hire BC people, and there wouldn't be people other than that. And we found out that maybe that wasn't happening, and we went up there and straightened it out.
The numbers are not large. Only about 6 Albertans are working out of this camp of about 50 people, and some think they've been treated unfairly.
Well, I think it's a lot of hassle with the unions. But the way I sort of look at it, when the oil boom was going in Alberta, we didn't bother anybody from BC or the Maritimes or wherever they were from.
In another camp, the supervisor says he sent 10 Albertans home, but it's clear they are getting around the problem. The cars in the parking lot have BC license plates, although mysteriously they were all bought in Alberta.
I don't know where they're from. They come here and say they're from Merritt or Logan Lake. That's their initiative to move and live wherever they want.
Even the supervisor can't win. For the men from the nearby community who show up at his gate looking for a job, even hiring BC residents is not good enough.
Seems like I think we should get first pick of these jobs since how we're from Merritt.
The fact that a number of Albertans have been sent home raises questions about how British Columbia interprets the Constitution. It contains something called mobility rights, and that is supposed to mean Canadians have the right to live and work anywhere in this country. Whit Fraser, CBC News, in the Coquihalla Valley in British Columbia.
Eastern Ukrainian cities and towns along the nearly 500-kilometer-long eastern front are coming under renewed attack tonight. Chris Brown shows us the targets and a warning there are some graphic images.
The ferocity of Russia's war against Ukraine has intensified, with missiles launched from the ground and from the air, pounding Ukrainian positions in the eastern Donbas region. Russia also hit cities such as Kramatorsk, where one person was killed, and there were awful scenes in Kharkiv too, where 4 were killed and 14 injured. For Ukrainians, the offensive signals a crucial new stage of Russia's war of aggression. Russia's foreign minister perversely frames it as an effort to liberate the region.
And I'm sure this will be a very important moment of this entire special operation.
Russia also bombed the steel mill in Mariupol, where the last Ukrainian defenders inside refused to surrender. The Azov Battalion, a far-right group that's now part of the Ukrainian National Guard, released video of what it claims are women and children hunkered down with them and presumably in extreme danger. Having destroyed the city, Russia is now portraying itself as its savior, showing its troops handing out food. Look, this is a humanitarian center of Russia, said the man Russia appointed to be Mariupol's new mayor. Installing a new government in Kyiv was Russia's goal too, but its attack failed. Kyiv's mayor, boxing champ Vitaly Klitschko, accepted a donation of fire trucks and ambulances from Germany and told us with the new offensive, Ukraine needs more Western help than ever.
It's very, very important for us, and we see who are real friends of Ukraine, especially in this critical time.
The toll on civilians is poised to become even more dreadful. Svetlana Komarova, who was 81, died in hospital in Irpin in March, but in the chaos of the Russian occupation, no one could find her body until Monday. There are rows upon rows of fresh graves here, and this is just one community that was in the path of Russia's invasion. With the Russian offensive has come new Western promises of weapons from the British and the Dutch, but time is short, and the fear is that help may not get to the Ukrainian front lines fast enough. Chris Brown, CBC News, Kyiv.
Now to a town not far from the embattled city of Mariupol in Oryhev, where we find our Margaret Evans and her team, who saw firsthand how quickly danger can come.
Early morning fog on the road to a town called Oryhev. The emptiness of the emerging landscape, peeling back the thin veil of war, and a front line creeping towards the town. There is still a daily market here, but fewer people to sell to, and aside from the soldiers, an absence of youth sent away for safety's sake. Social worker Valentina Loge cycles to visit her elderly or vulnerable clients in person. We were scheduled to go with her when a missile whistled overhead, Russian forces answering Ukrainian artillery fire. Residents are used to it, but get more serious about cover when the barrage doesn't stop, ourselves included.
Okay, shelter this way.
We're right now down in a bomb shelter. The soldiers we're with say we're in the middle of a little bit of a battle going on between the Ukrainians and the Russians, and so we're just hanging tight. But it certainly gives you an idea of what people living in this village go through on almost a daily basis. Farmers in the surrounding areas have stopped working as their fields are shelled, and the army warns against unexploded mines. The grouping of Russian occupation troops is very large south of Oryhev, says this territorial defense captain. Almost 2/3 of the Zaporizhia region are currently occupied. For the small rural communities, the world seems turned on its head. Natalia Olmachuk lives just north of Oryhev. All my life we lived peacefully, she says. Now you go to bed dressed so that you're always ready, and you listen to where the shells will fall. You don't know where to go. Back in Oryhev, Valentina Loge carried on with her work after the morning bombardment, but others are leaving, boarding the small bus for Zaporizhia city. Natalia Ivanova has clung to the notion of staying in her own home until now. Because where we live, there's very strong shelling, she says. Many houses have been destroyed. Ivan and his 12-year-old daughter Anna are also leaving. I still have friends here, she says. I'm very sad to leave my house. Her father says the fighting is too hot now, that they're forced to leave. More goodbyes in a country that's already suffered far too many. Separation's difficult enough to watch, let alone endure. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Oryhev.
A Florida judge has thrown out the federal mask mandate in the U.S. It means passengers on planes and other forms of public transportation can get rid of them. Flight attendants on some flights began collecting masks minutes after the decision was made public yesterday.
And if they say it, you're badass. No, you know better. Don't ever let them cover your faces again. Woo! Amen.
Major U.S. airlines and many of the busiest airports rushed to drop their requirements. The federal agency that administers air security confirmed it will no longer enforce the rule. Federal Transport Minister Omar Alghabra faced questions today here in Canada about the U.S. ruling and says Ottawa will maintain the mask mandate for travelers in Canada for now. Well, if you're ready for a little warmth this spring, you're not alone. Across Canada, it's been slow to shake winter's hold. How people are holding up next. And at 6:43, a live look tonight at Hansen Island near the northern coast of Vancouver Island. A beautiful evening there with calm waters, perfect for fishing, perhaps. Johanna has the full forecast next. BC has been blessed by some beautiful, if inconsistent, weather over the last few weeks. Yeah, there's probably been a lot more rain. But almost a third of the way through spring, many Canadians aren't having the same experience. Sarah Levitt looks at whether there's any warmth on the horizon for the rest of the country.
It's a spring tradition in Montreal and a sign of warmer weather, getting those winter tires off. Not this year. Heavy, wet snow fell overnight and turned to rain by early afternoon. Winter boots and umbrella weather. A messy cocktail, but Montrealers aren't surprised.
I don't mind it. To be honest with you, I knew it was coming.
I mean, it's Montreal, man. You gotta expect it. It is what it is.
It's Montreal, so we just have to live with it. I love winter anyway.
That snowfall wasn't limited to southern Quebec.
Yay, it's spring and the patio table is out. So exciting.
Part of Ontario, including the Greater Toronto area, was also hit with wet flurries. Not enough for the snow to stick, though.
It's not very good news, but it's not unusual at this time of the year.
The prairies, Ontario and Quebec do see snow in April, just not every year. Unusual, though, is the amount of snow, particularly how much it fell in southern Manitoba last week. Winnipeg got up to 35 centimeters. Bad news there, another storm is expected this week. In Vancouver, a rare sunny day after days of rain and hail. British Columbia is experiencing lower than average temperatures.
Last year on the same day I was at the beach, and it definitely doesn't feel like beach weather this April.
That's kind of strange though, because when you see the cherry blossom blooming, it's kind of like I expect to be kind of warm, nice and warm, right?
In Halifax, no snow but heavy winds and rain. Spring in Canada. But there may be good news.
The forecast calls for generally above normal temperature for the summer. So that's good news, at least with the spring that we had up to now.
Something to look forward to, trudging through this mess. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
Joe, Canada is really living up to the stereotype.
I know.
It's always freezing in Canada. You have horrible weather.
This April, yes, it is very typical Canadian winter weather. At least it's not snowing here in Vancouver, but yeah, some solidarity from coast to coast to coast when it comes to the spring that just isn't getting its act on. I want to act together. I want to show you the current temperatures across the country. Today, every major Canadian city was below seasonal, and seasonals now for most major Canadian cities for April anyway, which is often an average of extremes, is about 13, 14 degrees across the south anyway. This is the current radar. Edmonton, Calgary, Saskatoon, Winnipeg, all getting hit with snow tonight. In fact, Edmonton, Calgary under a snowfall warning. Toronto, Ottawa woke up to fresh snow. Thunder snow in Montreal, as you heard. And yes, the cold rain with big winds on the east coast. And we are watching for more snow in Manitoba this weekend. But Anita, I did see a 24-degree temperature in Toronto's forecast. They can only complain for so long. We are seeing those blue skies, and we are going to continue with the dry skies overnight and through most of our Wednesday. Watch as I take you through Wednesday morning. We're starting to see some high cloud roll in. I do think we'll still see the sun for part of Wednesday. It's around 3, 4, 5 p.m. that the showers will fill in. Most models holding it off until 5 p.m., but be prepared for a few raindrops as early as 3. That'll clear out as we head into Thursday afternoon, but Thursday is a bit unsettled. So a midweek blip when it comes to the rain. Here's taking you through to Thursday morning, a general 10 to 20 millimeters for the south coast. Lots of sun tomorrow, though, across the province. We're not quite at seasonal for places like Prince George, Williams Lake, but you'll be digging out of snow. Prince George and Fort St. John getting 10 centimeters tonight. Okay, so sunshine is abound in this long-range forecast. But you can see we only hit seasonal, just 14 for this time of the year, a couple times in our long range. But I think we'll take it compared to some of the other weather Canadians are having.
It's not looking too bad, and I like that you wore your sympathy blazer for everybody else. You've really got that winter vibe going on.
The cool look for everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Jo.
You're welcome.
Last week, we told you about the last glacier in Metro Vancouver receding at an alarming rate, which meant less water runoff flowing into the reservoir. That's a problem felt across the world, and now a new study has concluded there is less ice in their world's glaciers than previously believed. Here's what scientists have to say about its impacts.
This estimate puts the total amount of ice stored in mountain glaciers at 20% lower than our previous guess. And I think guess is a good word because Previously, we relied upon really sparse field measurements around the mountain chains across our planet, and that just wasn't good enough. And so this estimate is really making use of satellite measurements which cover more or less every glacier on the planet. People who live around them and actually downstream from them, more importantly, depend upon them as a buffer for the amount of water that enters the river systems from which they irrigate their crops and drink. Because the glaciers are melting away, it is already changing how frequently water enters into those river systems. And eventually, of course, if your river is supplied by a melting glacier that disappears, the river will disappear as well. Ultimately, when all glaciers melt, sea level rise will be less than we thought it would be. But none of us want to end up in that situation. We don't want all the glaciers to melt. We want them to last as long as possible. We want to preserve the ice on Earth, and that now, overnight, becomes a more difficult challenge. Now we know that there's 20% less ice in mountain glaciers. We have to think a little bit harder about how we want to preserve them.
Canadians everywhere, from Jeopardy to American Idol. No shortage of Canuck talent on the small screen last night, including a kid from Kamloops. We'll tell you about him next.
I have the old analog clock that was on the second floor up near the portrait of the Queen. It was just one of those things. Every time you were there, you were looking at this clock. If it was ice skating or a rock concert or anything else, that clock would be lit up, and when the stadium closed and I had an opportunity to have it for myself, I jumped at it.
$50 over there. On the terrace, 50 right here, thank you, sir. 75, I get 75 in the 100.
It's sad to see this place go, but I guess everything has its price and people want to get at things, and that's what everyone's doing here now today.
They were selling everything. When I saw the clock, I just hung around and thought that was something that I could do something with.
Sold it to you, sir, for 4.5.
When I was successful in the bid and it was mine, I said, oh my God, it's going to be great. I'm going to have that thing in my house just like a nightlight, and I'll be able to remember all the good times at the stadium just by that clock. I don't know what it is about it, but it still gives me good feelings, and every time I look at it, you know, it's a story to be told. I'll show you quickly. This is how it opens. I've had it for 21 years, recently retired, so it's been a lot of cleaning and these things that you do at this time in your life. So that clock is one of the things that needs a new home. And I've loved it for 21 years and enjoyed it, just here in my basement. But it'd be really nice if it could go back to its home. I'd love to see it at the Mary Brown Centre. Love to see it down in the corner there, or in City Hall, or I don't know, maybe Dominion Supermarket, or the original place. It'd be nice if maybe I could pass by some public place and there it is again, you know? Bring back memories for somebody else. They would remember, like I do, because it was all good memories.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Join CBC Vancouver's Gloria Makarenko at the annual Because Mothers Matter Awards on May 4th. Celebrate women's extraordinary achievements at this year's event. Learn more at mothersmattercenter.ca. And the Doucette document. Get your tickets at doucettefestival.ca.
A few Canadians making a name for themselves on American TV last night, but it was the end of the line for Cameron Whitcomb. He's the Kamloops teen competing on American Idol. Whitcomb earned a standing ovation and a spot in the top 20 on Sunday. He also became the first Canadian man to make it to the top 20 in the last 2 seasons. But the 19-year-old didn't get the viewer votes needed to take him to the final 10 last night. On his Facebook page, Whitcomb says, "We haven't heard the last of him yet." And 2 Canadians went head-to-head on last night's episode of Jeopardy! Caitlin Hayes from North Vancouver tried to unseat current champ Mateo Roach from Toronto. Hayes got the final question right, but did not wager enough to win. Last night was Roach's 10th victory. The 23-year-old's winnings stand at just over $227,000 US. An amazing run. Always nice to see Canadians doing well on all those American shows. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. That's all we've got. We'll be back here tomorrow. And Dan will be here at 11 o'clock after returning from the Canadians game. You can see it's about to get underway on your screen. Have a good night.